New Edition or Jodeci?
New Edition. Easy for me.
Dance moves, hey. Go Whitney. Go Whitney. Go Whitney.
Hey y'all, Whit from The Williams here. So, you might be wondering, like, why is there a cookbook in ribs? Today I'm going to show you all one of my favorite recipes from Ayesha Curry's cookbook, actually. And so, we are going to do her sticky honey garlic baby back ribs.
Sticky honey garlic baby back ribs.
Now, you might be saying, okay, well, I can read a cookbook myself. What I've learned by having so many cookbooks and so many great friends that don't really cook is people like to know what are some of the best recipes to use in a cookbook. So this is one of our family's favorite recipes. Like, we make it all the time. And so I'm going to just walk you all through it, give you some of the tips and pointers that I've learned from making this recipe a few times, and then you'll be able to make it yourself afterwards. So the sticky honey garlic baby back ribs. I'm starting here with a rack of baby back ribs. Pretty much I have just rinsed them off. My grandma would kill me if I did not rinse the meat off. So these ribs have been rinsed off. Do whatever you do for yourself. And then I've cut them in half. That way they are just on this baking sheet to go in the oven. Now with this baking sheet, this, my friends, is an aluminum foil baking sheet. What I've learned from making these ribs so many times is that they are really sticky. And so they are so good, but messy. And so when I made them the very first time, y'all, like, I had to throw my baking sheet away. So Ayesha tells you in the cookbook, make sure you wrap it really well. I thought I did, but yeah, that sheet was gone. So I have started buying aluminum foil pans, and I just use these foil pans when I make this recipe. That way when they're done, I just throw them away. So we're just gonna get into it, get these ribs seasoned up. Use whatever seasonings you like to use. I have the little Creole seasoning. I find it's just really an all-around seasoning, does it pretty easily. Ayesha recommends some garlic powder, which I have just a smidgen of, as you can see. And she recommends using kosher salt. So we're gonna get that all over those ribs, get them all over. Some black pepper, just a little bit because some of that is in that Creole seasoning already. Now, this is where I like to get a little funky with it myself. So I normally put a little bit of cayenne pepper and just a little bit of paprika. My grandma always used paprika for coloring, so I just use it as well. I think it adds a nice little bit of flavoring. Not as much as just a smoked paprika, but I'm gonna go regular paprika today. Dropping on a little bit of that paprika on here. All right.
Hey, what's that?
This is just regular salt.
So you need kosher and regular salt?
So you don't actually have to, that's up to you. I'm gonna go ahead and say that up front. I've noticed that the kosher salt doesn't necessarily have as much flavor, so it doesn't make it as salty. It just kind of is like a real good finisher, if that makes sense. So I tend to use a little bit of the regular salt, not as much since I have already used that kosher salt, but just a little bit to get some of that salty flavor that I think salt actually adds. So now I just massage my meat. I get all of that seasoning all over it. Get all up in those crevices. So I love to see that the ribs start to really take on that seasoning. You can see the difference in the color here. See, these white parts here are now starting to look a little brownish, a little orangey from that seasoning in comparison to these. So for me, that's one of the signs that my meat is really soaking in that seasoning well. Also really important to know about this recipe is that you are going to oil your baking sheet from the beginning. So you can see there's already oil on this baking sheet. All right, just gonna rub this other one in, and then these are going to bake in the oven on 325 for 30 minutes. They are going to bake just this way. So meat side is up because it tells us that the meat side is gonna go down on the second part of the recipe. So they are meat side up and they go in this way. So we have made this recipe before using spare ribs. The recipe itself turns out really well, but I will say, Ayesha's right, use the baby backs on this one if you can. Try to get some of the extra meaty ones. We've learned that if you use the extra meaty baby back ribs, you really soak in that sauce really nicely and you get a nice bite of meat in each bite that you take. All right, so as I shared, these are gonna go into the oven on 325. They're gonna go in there for 30 minutes. So I'm gonna set my timer and then I'll be back with you to take you through the next part. Okay, y'all, so we are back. We have our ribs out of the oven now. And as you can see, they are not done yet. So we are going to make sure that the oven is set up to 450. And as that gets heating up, we're gonna put the sauce on for them. Now, what goes into this sticky honey garlic sauce? Clearly honey and garlic, but what else? So let's get it going. Recipe now says turn the ribs meaty side down. So that's why we had the meaty side up before, because it's important to read the recipe all the way through before you start cooking. You'll learn stuff like that. So meaty side down now. All right, so we have our whisk here. Definitely from a blender, not a real whisk. Don't laugh at me. You gotta do what you gotta do. We're gonna go ahead and add everything in here. So we're gonna start with the sugar. And so this, my friends, is 1.5 cups of dark brown sugar. Just gonna drop all that in there. Then we are going to add in our water next. This is 1 cup of water. Just dump that in there with the sugar. Then we have our honey. So this is 1/2 cup of honey. You see it just flowing on out. So what I did with this container here, normally you can spray it with non-stick and that will make the honey flow right out. I didn't have any non-stick, so I just used a little bit of oil on a paper towel and wiped it around. So you see this honey is coming out very nicely, just about all there. And then we're gonna use our whisk and get that last little bit to wipe them on out. That way you don't lose too much of your honey being stuck to the container. There we go. Perfect. All right. Then we're gonna drop in some garlic. Now, you might be saying, hey, did Whitney really chop up that garlic like that? Is it minced that finely? No, I bought it like this. I got kids. Now you are, one of those garlic purists and you want to mince it up yourself, more power to you. But I gotta do a little bit of a shortcut here. Throw that in there. And then lastly, these onions. So this is about 1/4 cup of onion. Add a little bit more, a little bit less to your liking. And that was about 8 cloves of garlic. All right, so we have all of that into our bowl. And we're just gonna mix that up with our whisk. Now, I do find that the whisk with the holes really just makes that sauce really just flow very nicely. Oh, that's our oven telling us that it's ready to go. So we are wrapping up this sauce here. So that's just how quick this recipe really is. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of time to actually do it. Most of the time it's spent in the oven. All right, so what I'm doing now is really just coating these ribs with this sauce. Just gonna pour this sauce all over these ribs, getting them nice and coated. And like we said, these are going to bake in the oven on 450. They're going to bake for about an hour. All right, so now we have some foil. We are going to put this foil over this pan really tightly. That way we can make sure that all of the heat stays into this pan. So we're going to put it on really tightly. And then, like I said, we're going to let them bake. All Alright, so I am getting this all nice and foiled up. And then this is gonna go in the oven for about an hour. You want it to be nice and tender when it comes out, and then it will bake for 5 minutes without the foil, just to crisp it up. The 5 minutes can sometimes be a little bit long, so I'll say just kind of keep your eye on it. But we'll get to that when it's time. All right, this is nice and tightly wrapped, I think. Like I said, just put it all over. You don't want that sticky sauce to fall out in your oven because it's sticky. And it's gonna turn it black and nasty. And you're gonna have a hard time cleaning it, so don't do that. Nice and tight, okay? All right. So, like I said, it can get real sticky if it gets out in that oven. So sometimes I even like to put it on a baking pan with a little bit of foil underneath it, just in case some of that juice sprays out. So that's what I've done here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get it in the oven for 1 hour. All right, y'all, so we are back. We have our ribs out of the oven. We are just going to remove the foil. Ooh, look at all that heat coming out. All right, let's get this other side. Now, like I said, you want to be careful. You see that steam popping out? You want to make sure you don't hurt yourself. And then, as you can see now, the ribs are cooked through. So we are going to let them finish crisping up without the foil. But you see all of this juice. Really nice. Let's stick our fork in there. Ooh, go straight through. Tender. Tender love. Love so tender. So we are gonna flip these over, get it back to the meaty side up, let them crisp up for about 5 minutes. You see all that sauce is on there, really sticky, really gooey, but really yummy. And so we are going to just flip this other one over here. Perfect. And you see how that fork just goes straight in there? It's so tender. Perfect, perfect. So yeah, we're gonna stick it in there for about 5 minutes, just let it crisp on up. Let that sauce really caramelize on there a little bit more. And we're gonna cut these up and eat. So easy, so quick for you as far as your prep work goes. They do take about an hour and a half to cook in the oven. Like I said, we're gonna put these in the oven for about 5 more minutes. We're gonna cut them up and then we are going to eat, my friends. I wanna just thank you for coming and joining us today, learning about this recipe. I hope that it was helpful for you. I hope you got a few tips that you may not have gotten from just reading through the recipe. And I really hope to see you again on From The Williams. So, From The Williams with love.